Hi, I'm Chris McBrien, a Gen Xer, and the pop culture from my generation is awesome.
And I'm Yancy Eaton, a millennial, and the pop culture from my generation is dope.
Episode 64, Rounders Movie Review. Chris McBrien here. This is Pop Goes Your World. Yancy Eaton is with me as always. Yancy, what's happening, my friend?
Not a whole lot. We just talked off air for a little bit. That a little bit under the weather. I can't even speak right. Apparently, I've lost control of the English language. I'm a little sick, but kind of excited about our guest. You guys know that he's a very, very good friend of mine. I'm going to let you bring him in, but not a whole lot's changed. I'm I'm at the tail end of like an 8-day in a row streak. Battling this really bad cold. I work in and out of a freezer and a cooler all day. So I'm just ready to jump into a movie that I really love a lot. It's like a cherished, beloved movie in like my little circle of friends. And why don't you bring our guest in? Because I'm super, super excited about this one.
Of course, our guest needs no introduction, but I'll introduce him a little bit. You can find him on Twitter at Sammy Reid FI. Sammy Reid is his name. He's also a writer at Roto Grinders, co-host also of the Baseballholics Anonymous podcast with Doug Thorburn. Like that guy too. Sammy, you've been on the show before. I'm really glad that you decided to come back. Welcome back to the show talking about Rounders. How's it going, my friend?
It's going great, man. I'm super pumped to be back on this pod with you guys. You know that I listen to like every episode of this podcast, so I'm a big fan of it just naturally. And I mean, frankly, you couldn't pick a better movie for me to be on for, so.
Oh, it's a good one. Like, apparently Yancy loves this movie. Apparently you like it too. We're going to get into this for sure. Guys, before we get started, I wanted to mention something. Yancy, I mentioned last week, this is a millennial thing that I'm doing. I decided to watch Breaking Bad, and guess what? I made it through all 5 seasons. We finished it.
Wow.
So good. Congratulations. The Gen Xer.
Amazing.
I finally stopped watching Happy Days reruns. I stopped watching The Love Boat over and over again. No more meatballs for the 2100th time. And I decided to watch a millennial show. So we watched Breaking Bad. I'm not going to mention anything about spoilers or anything like that. But I tell you what, let's do a show on Breaking Bad at some point, and we'll talk about it.
I would love nothing more, Chris. Seriously.
Okay, it was good. Anything else on the go for you from a pop culture point of view? What's going on in California right now, Sammy?
Dude, I mean, the land of sun and beaches is like been super dreary and rainy, but so like you, I've kind of been under the weather for a little bit, but I'm actually getting like married in 5 weeks basically from today. So that's
And I also hear, by the way, first of all, congratulations on getting married. Welcome to the club. Welcome to the club. But the thing is that I really should mention about that is I understand you're going to be having a visitor come out and join you and hang out for a little bit for the bachelor party, and it's not Chris McBrien. So who is this person that's going to come visit you?
Dude, it's this kid, Yancy Eaton, is flying. His wife is actually letting him get away, and he's flying from Florida to California to come hang out. Like, Yancy's been a good buddy of mine for, years now. And, it's one of those like internet things where we've never actually met face to face. And so I'm pretty pumped to have him out there. We're going to, get weird. We're going to do some paintballing, skydiving, some unnamed things, etc. So it should be a hoot and a holler.
Oh, man, that's going to be fun. I mentioned earlier on Twitter, I said 2018 is the year that I want to try and convince Yancy Eaton to come up to Canada and visit me. But you got him first, so good for you.
I swooped you.
I know, and just like you, I've known Yancy for years. Yancy and I have been nominated for a podcast award on 2 different podcasts. And we've known each other for years, worked together for years, never met him.
Yep.
I don't know. For all I know, I'm going to meet him and I'm going to be like, man, you're a jerk.
It'll happen one of these days. Honestly, the only reason why I'm going to California is I was promised hookers and cocaine.
All that
honey, turn off the show.
All that unnamed stuff he just named, Yeah,
exactly. Well, I'm not going to promise you that in Canada because we just have igloos and stuff. And you mentioned it was cold out there. It was like Yancy the other week. He's like, oh, it's so cold down here in Florida. I'm like, what? It's minus 25 Celsius before the wind chill here in Canada. Give me a break.
Please, it got down to under 60 and Yancy just bitches out and he's like,
I noticed a picture from North Florida. It was on the internet and there was a bunch of snowplows going down the road. It's like near Tallahassee or something like that. There's not even any snow on the ground. What the hell do you need snowplows for? There's 6 feet of snow at the end of my driveway. Oh my God. Okay, let's get to this.
They were shutting down whole towns, Chris.
You guys are ridiculous. You have no. This is why he's not coming to Canada. He's going to California because it's warm out there. I don't blame him. Anyway, you guys ready to start talking about Rounders?
Yep.
Definitely.
All right, let's go. Yancy, what the hell are you doing to me?
There's a girl topless in it. I mean, I'm sure you probably have seen it.
Boom, 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 boom,
Yep.
boom, 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 boom.
Spoilers ahead.
But he was not my favorite pilot of any of these Star Wars movies. That, of course, was Porkins.
He might be one of my favorite actors.
That's some good
I think that's fair. I do think that's fair.
The fact that we're kind of nerds.
Textbook nerds.
I thought I was looking at my mother's old but that's in Ohio.
How disappointed was your son whenever you said, I'm going to go take you to see Bare Naked Ladies? And he's like, oh, it's just a concert.
What is going on, man? Okay, so this week's movie is Rounders. We mentioned it. It's from 1998. Yancy, you nominated this. It's funny because it's kind of not... I mentioned this to somebody and I was like, oh, we're doing... it's time for us to do a millennial film. So Yancy nominated Rounders. They're like, that's not a millennial film, but it is. It's 98, technically. It's a millennial film, right? So, and we mentioned before, you know, when we talked about, you know, if you look back on what your favorite year is, from a pop culture point of view, it's always the year when you're 11 years old, for whatever reason. And this is just close. It's just 1 year before. So it definitely falls in that for you. So I'm going to let, and I know that you wanted Sammy to come on the show, not just because he's a good friend of ours, which he has been for years, obviously, but obviously I'm assuming the reason why you're asking Sammy to come on the show this week to talk about Rounders, because he loves this movie too. I'm going to throw it to you guys. I'm going to let you start it out and then we'll come back to me. So Yancy, do you want to start us off and maybe mention why you nominated the show, why you love it, what you love about it, just as a general, and then we'll get in depth?
Yeah, sure. So I don't consider myself a professional poker player by any means. I rarely play nowadays, but there was a period of my life where I was playing semi-professionally online, where I was playing 200,000 to 300,000 hands online, playing micro stakes, multi-tabling. I was really, really involved with poker. Even now as an adult, you know, they basically completely stripped away almost every form of online poker. I still will go out and play. I'll go to bars. I'll go to, you know, casinos occasionally, play tournaments. I still, you know, buy and read poker books. I consume as much poker content as I possibly can. The itch never went away from me. I still love poker like you guys would not believe. It's always been there for me. It'll always be there for me. And Rounders, while it has its flaws, is the best thing. People who know poker and love poker, it's the best form of like pop culture we have that tries to accurately portray what life is like as like, you know, a professional or a semi-professional poker player, like somebody who's out there, you know, putting in the hours at the table, grinding, that type of thing. Like I said, it is not a perfect film, but it is the very best thing that we have. And it is very hard to make a 100% accurate, believable poker film, believe it or not. And like with anything, if you have like a niche or you have a particular hobby, to make something about it, it's going to be really difficult to get everybody to completely be on board with everything you're saying about it. And you're going to miss stuff. And this movie does miss stuff. It's not perfect, but I still love it. Ed Norton is amazing in it. Matt Damon's really good in it. And it's just a perfect poker movie. Sammy, over to you.
Yancy wanted you to come on this podcast to talk about Rounders, so I'm assuming there's a reason for this. What's the reason?
I mean, I guess so. This movie is probably in my top 5 most watched movies of all time. Like, I've definitely seen Rounders several dozen times. And for me, it's, you know, like Yancy, I was a big poker head. Like, I played professionally for a couple of years for a living. And, you know, to me, there's so much great stuff about this movie. You know, it came out in 1998, which is, you know, about 5 years before Chris Moneymaker won the World Series of Poker main event. And that really ramped up the 2000s poker revolution. So this movie was not that popular before then, even though it's got this amazing cast, right? But, you know, it really became a cult hit since then. And the thing I really love about it is it really captures what poker was like before it became part of pop culture, right? The underground games, the backroom games. And it really does an amazing job of capturing the nuance of poker. It's amazing, just all the little things they do, the way they handle chips and cards, like it's very slick. And it's also fantastic with poker vernacular, right? They use these terms in a way that appeals to both sides, right? If you didn't know poker, you'd still get the gist of what things meant. They don't like force it in and make it awkward. And I think this is a really important part of the movie. It really makes it work because I don't know. It's just
accessible, right?
It is. Like you said, people that don't know poker, but people that do know poker, it really can appeal to both. And I think that's a really important part of the nuance of this film.
Okay, so you want to hear my take on the movie?
Yes, and I'm afraid, like, I was afraid you wouldn't like this because it was made after 1985 and John Hughes did not direct it. But I'm holding out hope because it's more of a movie than a film. So lay it on us.
Yeah, so that's always the fear, right? Anything after 1985, oh, Chris is going to hate. No, that's not always the way. I will start out by saying I'm not a poker guy. Never really have been. Never really enjoyed playing poker. So there was that, going into it for me. But I didn't know what this movie was about. When Yancy nominated last week, I'd never heard of it. So I was like, I don't know what this movie is. So I didn't go in thinking, oh, it's a poker movie. But I will tell you what, I really liked this movie the first time that I saw it when it was called Good Will Hunting. Now, you millennials love all your repackaged and repurposed and reimagining movies. So I think that's why you like this movie, because this should have been called Good Will Hunting Plays Poker. Instead of being good at math, he's good at playing poker. Right? And the professor who didn't live up to his expectations is played by Martin Landau instead of Robin Williams. Instead of that Stellan Skarsgård acting as his mentor in the movie, it's John Turturro. The girlfriend that he alienates from himself is Gretchen Mol instead of Minnie Driver. A nice improvement, though, by the way. I will say that. But overall, I've seen this movie before, and I liked it a lot better the first time around. So have at me, guys.
This is actually a very good take, Chris. I did not ever put those things together, but when you kind of string them out like that, there might be something there.
Yeah,
that's normally what I feel about Chris's critiques. I'm immediately mad and offended, but he also has a point, so I'm conflicted.
Oh, that's what makes doing the podcast so fun. I'll tell you what. Here's the thing, Yancy. The other thing that my takeaway from this is, almost every time that I give you a movie to watch from my generation, right? You always make the comment about the movie, about the selection that I pick, and you always point out and you say it's dated. Well, right. I hate to say this to you, Yancy, but I think you managed to find one of the few millennial movies that's dated as hell already. Now, I know
I 100% agree.
It was made in 98, right? So I get it's 20 years old. So that, actually, it's hard to believe. Man, 20 years since 98. But this is from a time when the World Series of Poker was like the latest fad, right? ESPN at the time was treating poker like it was a sport. And I know you guys are going to hate on me for it, but hint, it's not. And I remember the guys that were playing on those TV tournaments, they became sort of quote-unquote celebrities, like Chris Moneymaker, like you mentioned, like the guy in this movie. So, I guess it's not a surprise that a movie about, these 2-bit card hustlers wanting to go to Vegas to be poker stars was a real product of the times back then. But I think the movie's dated, don't you?
A little bit, and I think you made a really good point that it almost is a sports movie in many ways, right? There's the face-off at the beginning, and then the failure, and then there's the build-up and the fall from grace, and then, they go in for the last confrontation, and, the guy overcomes it at the end, right? It's really got kind of a sports timeline in that regard.
Like watching Rocky, but in poker.
Right,
it's the classic hero's journey, to be honest with you. Like he messes up at the beginning, he goes through a journey, he finds redemption, and in the end, he is, victorious in it. It's like textbook movie writing in that sense.
Well, and it even has a montage, right? It's even got that poker montage when Mikey and Worm have to make the money, and they go out and they start hitting this game and this game, and I mean, this is one of the most fun montages for me. Like I put it up there with the Wedding Crashers sex montage at the beginning. It's just so enjoyable for me to watch every time.
And what about Rocky's montage? Even Rocky had a montage. Come on, guys.
Oh, absolutely.
One of the best. It's just so funny that I find it interesting that I'm talking about this movie being dated. Like, how the hell am I, a Gen Xer, telling a couple millennials that their movie's old and dated? How the hell did this happen? This is not what I expected.
This is like when I tell people they're lazy. It's like, I'm super lazy. So if I'm calling you lazy, you're definitely lazy.
Exactly. I spent all my time watching Fonzie, old Happy Days episodes in the Love Boat and watching Meatballs 8 million times. And I'm saying, this show's dated. You're making me watch. Okay, a couple go ahead.
I will say this really quickly, Chris, talking about the dated thing. Mm-hmm. Me looking at it as a poker player, just a lot of the, like Sammy mentioned this earlier, but a lot of the vernacular, the types of games that he was playing, the style that they were playing, that of itself is incredibly dated. Like, poker has changed so much, and even Sammy can attest to this, where the average poker player is so much better than they were 10 or 15 years ago, just because there's so much information, free information as far as game theory and just really playing sound statistically driven poker, where that style it's archaic, and seeing that like in a movie, like I said, it does not date well. From a movie standpoint, you're right, like it is dated, but also from a sheer gameplay standpoint, it is incredibly dated.
And see, I wouldn't have that take on it because I'm not a poker player myself. So I would never have picked up on any of that. But I did think, though, that not being a poker player myself, that I thought that they did kind of explain a lot of it pretty well. So I think it wasn't at any point where I was like, okay, this is just for poker players. The vernacular, like you said, on the poker is just, it's too in depth. No, so they balanced a fine line, I think, so people like yourselves that love poker could watch it and dig it. And then people that don't know poker could still watch it and still follow it and not, be lost. So I would give them credit for that. But one of the other things that I want to bring up in this movie, because, Yancy, now Sammy, you said you listen to the podcast, right? So on a regular basis, Yancy will kind of take me to task, right? And he'll say like the movies that I make him watch are like morally reprehensible and things like that. I'm not putting. You
mean like when he shaded the hell out of Animal House?
Yeah, exactly. Animal House, this is terrible. He's spying on women. He's doing this. He's doing all this. And then even Revenge of the Nerds. Oh, it's so terrible. It's like he has this morally righteous, take. But he definitely social justice warriored Animal House. That is for sure. That's fine. That's fine. But it's a recurring theme on this podcast where Yancy says, basically, the Gen X movies are like bad, like they're morally reprehensible. But I'd like to talk about this movie for a little bit when it comes to that, because I feel that this movie is trying to take a morally righteous approach to its subject matter, but I'm not buying it from day one. And here's the thing. The professor in it, okay, Martin Landau's character, right? He has this reasoning when he gives the kid the $10,000, right? Remember, he calls it a mitzvah, right? A good deed. And the professor, he thinks back and he remembers, oh, there was a time when someone helped me and he tells the story of when he decided to become a lawyer instead of becoming a rabbi, and how we're supposed to somehow believe that that's conflated. Like that's exactly the same thing as deciding to, instead of become a lawyer, become an underground gambler. Yep. The movie wraps itself around this cloak of righteousness, I think, to kind of cover up the fact these are just a bunch of seedy poker players who are wannabe TV celebrities on World Series of Poker. Don't you think?
Well, and that's the thing with like Mike McDermott. Like, it's Matt Damon, so he comes off as very squeaky clean. This is also his best hair movie, by the way. His hair is incredible in this movie, and he's smart and he's in law school, right? But he also gambles with his case money and loses it all on a hand. He lies to his girlfriend. He gets mixed up with gangsters. Like, his actions are definitely a lot more seedy than his outward appearance portrays.
I thought it was the case. Oh, sorry. Yeah, go ahead, Yancy.
I know it's difficult when we have two people on, but I thought exactly what you're talking about as far as the moral, high standing. I think a lot of what he does, Mike as a main character, actually is kind of reprehensible. Like Sammy mentioned, no legitimate professional poker player is going to put his entire bankroll into one session. That I have never done that. I don't know anybody who I take seriously as a player would ever do that. But even so, they kind of pit his girlfriend as this, she's getting in his way. She doesn't understand him. She's the one that's holding him back. Whenever in reality, she's totally justified in her in being the way she is and trying to reform him and trying to hold him back, because this is a guy that literally blew his entire life savings, like I said, in one poker session. That is the textbook case of somebody who, if you're capable of doing that, you should not be gambling. You know what I mean? So like you said, he is very much a degenerate, and obviously Worm, Edward Norton's character is very much the same, kind of the same cloth. So I like what you were saying, how it tries to build it up as they're doing the right thing, they're going for it, they're following their dreams and stuff. But in reality, these dudes, it worked out this one time, but they could just as easily be bust and wind up dead in a ditch, basically, because they're not paying off their debt. So I 100% agree with you as far as them appearing to take the moral high ground whenever they're not actually doing it.
So I'm going to address Sammy's point first, because he was talking about how Matt Damon plays this bad character but looks good. I thought the same thing though with Good Will Hunting, right? In Good Will Hunting, he's a good looking guy, with a great $1 million smile and all this, and he's a jerk. In that movie, he pretty much he's a jerk in that movie, and so the same thing here. And so Yancy, sorry, I lost my train of thought. What was the thing you were just saying?
I was basically just agreeing with you about how they try to pit them almost as heroes. The protagonists of the series, of the movie itself, are actually pretty reprehensible when it comes to the things they do and their interactions with other people. They are kind of shifty, degenerates, and the movie doesn't really, do an honest job of portraying that.
I think it's interesting. You bring up an interesting point about the girlfriend, because they make, in a way, kind of the way the script plays out, because you see things from his side of view. He's the protagonist, right? Like you mentioned, and she's almost like kind of like the bad guy. You know what I mean? Because she's not going along with him. And I don't know why, but it just jumped into my mind. It's like, because you see that sometimes in movies where like the bad guy is really the good guy. Sometimes, and the one that comes to mind is, you guys, okay, here's a Gen X movie, Ghostbusters. You both have seen Ghostbusters. I'm not talking about that remake, with Melissa McCarthy crap. I'm talking about the original one from '84. You know what I'm talking about? You guys have both seen that? It's like that guy, what was his name? Peck. Remember, he comes in and he's like with the government and he's trying to shut them down, because if you think about it, what they're trying to do is like capture ghosts with like seedy material and like trap him in this, and they be total dicks to him, and then they make fun of the size of his penis, and it's like he's actually the good guy here. Like, anyway, I don't know why that came to mind. I thought it was another interesting thing, and I think Sammy brought it up, is with the two characters. So first of all, I think Edward Norton is an excellent actor. Okay, he's a really good actor. But that being said, I found him to be a little miscast in this role. Maybe, I don't know. I was distracted by it. But the other thing I think is interesting is that the movie tries to separate these two guys, right? It tries to say like Worm is the guy that tries to win by hustling, and Mike is the guy that tries to win by skill, right? But if you go back to the opening scene in the movie, the first line in the movie is Mike explaining, because he's narrating it, and he says that old poker saying, right? If in 30 minutes, if you can't spot the sucker at the table, then the sucker is you. So even though they're trying to make out that Mike is relying on skill, he's just a hustler too, isn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, Worm owns it. Mikey doesn't really, right?
Right.
But you bring up a really good point about that line. I think some of the things that make this movie so engaging, especially for those that have seen it multiple times, is that there's so many just classic lines in there, and that's one of them, right? And then there's all the stuff that Teddy KGB says in his ridiculous, over-the-top Russian accent, right? Pay that man his money. Yeah, it's just so classic. The alligator bloodline, in my club, I'll splash the pot whenever I please, right? And then Worm's line, in the game of life, women are the rake. I just think there's...
You're forgetting my very favorite quote from this entire thing, where it talks about it's immoral to not take a sucker's money.
Right.
To let a sucker keep his money, it's actually immoral. So like they're actually saying like, doing the right thing is taking these people's money. Like, don't feel bad about that. But not to cut you off, Sammy, but Chris, I honestly, I completely disagree with you about Edward Norton and him being cast in this role. Mm-hmm. And maybe Sammy, you can kind of piggyback a little bit, but I feel like he is the most genuine poker centric character in the entire movie. I know people who act just like that. His justifications for the things that he does, like his trying to get an edge as instead of actually studying game theory and studying statistics and trying to play sound, reasonable poker and take advantage and be exploitative of other people's weaknesses, he tries to cheat, right? I've played in poker tournaments where people were literally pocketing extra chips at the chip table, or, house games where people were colluding with each other and trying to send each other signals. Like I said, the way that he is, he's so brazen and he's so rash and confident, but whenever he's actually put up against a wall, like he's very like snivelly, and like he just doesn't own up to his mistakes. Like I said, all of his mannerisms, the way he justifies his actions, I felt like he is seriously the most accurate like rendition. You will find that person in every single card room in America. Sammy, what do you think?
I agree with that. I did like Edward Norton quite a bit. I think he plays the role to a T, and for a lot of the same reasons that you do. Matt Damon, I mean, I love him as an actor. I think he's fine in this movie, but I actually like Damon less than Norton. I think Malkovich, I mean, he's just over the top and ridiculous, like I mentioned, but he's great. Turturro's great. I think Martin Landau's great. We didn't even mention Femke Janssen, who's just sultry as all get out. And
unbelievable.
When Mikey does not hook up with her when she comes up to the apartment, like every time I cringe, I'm like, bro, just go for it. Like, it's on. So
she's a former Bond girl too.
She is. I really like this cast. I mean, for a movie that did not really blow up and became more of a cult classic, the cast in this movie, I mean, Damon, Norton, and Malkovich are they're really three of the better actors of this generation, right?
I agree.
And
yeah, I agree. Let me just jump in. I just want to just defend myself a little bit about Norton and just maybe rephrase it. It's not that I don't think he's good in this role. I think he's an outstanding actor. I felt that he's a little bit too big for this role. I think that's what I'm trying to say. And so I was distracted by that. He's such a good actor. I felt like he was slumming it a bit in this role. Does that make sense?
I mean, he was definitely slumming it. Let's be honest. I think everybody was slumming it.
Yeah. I don't know. I just felt like he was a little too big of an actor for that role. I don't know. There was just something about it that just
was he that big in 1998 though?
Oh yeah, I think by then he'd already done the People versus Larry Flint, and people knew, oh wow, this guy can act.
Yeah, you know? He went on one heck of a run after that, though.
He did.
Like from 98 to like 2002 or 2003. That was quite the run.
American History X was around that time, you know, Fight Club, all that stuff, right? So.
Yep. Hey, Chris.
Yes.
I know. Normally, you normally drive the train on this. I want to kind of like kick this back and forth between me and Sammy because, like, I think the most enjoyable thing that I have about this movie, we've talked about The Matrix, how it has legs, and how I constantly think about it and revisit it and think about different things. It's become almost like a cottage industry, and you know, Sammy can attest. He can see the screenshots, like, you know, every couple months. Your boy Yance will get drunk, and then he'll start watching this movie, and then I'll start picking up on little things that are kind of wrong, or, you know, people who really play poker, they would notice it, or just certain things that they don't seem to really jive with how poker is really played. And so, like, I label these as kind of like issues. Like, I will admit that I love Rounders. I you know, suggested this movie, but it has issues. I want to just give you a couple bullets really, really quickly, just for like people at home who've seen this movie. They can kind of, you know, give us like a golf clap, or like, I totally disagree. Sammy, I don't know if you have any. I can kick it back to you too. But just
I have countless issues. Yes.
Okay, so if I miss any, like I said, I know this isn't like great radio, but if I miss any, I'll kick it back to you and you can give them to me. Okay, so number one issue, the way they deal the community cards on the actual felt, how they're overlapping each other and they're not evenly spaced out and not touching, that tilts the hell out of me. I have never played cards anywhere where cards are dealt like that, right?
Yeah, it's very not pleasing to anyone with OCD, for sure.
It's terrible, right? Little things like how they don't rake the chips after each round of betting. They just sit in front of them. That doesn't happen, right? Like things like you're playing in a high stakes poker game, but there isn't a designated dealer. Everybody's taking turns dealing. That doesn't happen ever. You know, little things like how Matt Damon's character is speaking out to Teddy KGB every time he makes, you know, like actions like, oh, I think you're bluffing, or I think you're chasing the flesh. Like, that doesn't happen. Things like that. Even little things how, like, all these, you know, quote unquote professional gamblers are completely disinterested and actually hiding their hole cards. They're just holding them up willy-nilly, like two cards in the air, like, you know, like they're holding like a cocktail or something. That never happens. I'm thinking of some other stuff. Like, say after they went meeting with Graham, right, and they're deciding that we have to pay off $15,000. They decide, okay, we have $1,200 between us, and then he literally, the first game he mentions is a $30-$60 game, which, Chris, I know you're not super familiar with poker, but a $30-$60 game, that is a gigantic high-stakes poker game. I have never played that in my life. And what that equates to, if you have a $1,200 bankroll and you're playing a 30-60 game, that gives you 20 big blinds. You're literally you're going to be the shortest stack by far. There's tons and tons of examples like this, like the way they size their bets. Like I said, the fact that, like, whenever Teddy KGB is dealing a hand to him, they don't have a bottom card that protects, that doesn't show what the bottom card is. There's lots of little stuff like that, but I've been talking a long time and I hate my voice. So, Sammy, what are some other things that you've noticed as far as like problems with the movie?
I mean, there's a lot, and it really comes down to details. Again, if you've played a lot of poker, there are some challenges. First off, you mentioned Grandma. I mean, understand that there is actually a gangster named Grandma in this movie. And what he does is he wears long johns and pork pie hats. And that's basically he's so ridiculous. Like,
yep.
How did you guys come up with this character? There's a lot of things in terms of the bet sizing. In the first scene versus KGB and Mikey, Teddy leads out on the river, and the pot's like $5,000 if you add it up, and Teddy leads off for $15K. And it's like, this just would almost never happen. There's that great flashback with Johnny Chan where they're playing, like, you know, 300, 600 limit. And, you know, it's like, oh, well, I raised, well, I re-raised, and this and that. And finally, at the end, Johnny Chan folds, getting like 9-1 pre-flop in a limit game, which, again, you would never even fold that with 7 deuce. Like, it just makes no sense.
Snap call.
And, yeah, and in the last scene, Mikey acts first in a hand that Teddy KGB is dealing. Right. Which again is an issue that doesn't happen. And then he like leads off for $1,000 into a pot where the blinds are 20-50. So that's a 20 big blind open. And then Teddy KGB re-raises to 5K, which is half his stack. Mikey goes all in, and KGB dumps it, getting like better than 3-1. And it's like, wait, what happened here? There's some a little kind of sketchy part at the end where the math doesn't quite add up. Mikey beats Teddy KGB twice, so he goes from 10K to 20K, and then beats him again to go to 40. But he says, I have more than 60. So possibly Teddy reloaded at some point, or else they just goofed up the math. Because then he's like, well, I got 15 going back to grandma, and 6 to the Chesterfield, and 10 to the professor, and now I got 3 stacks of high society, what he had at the beginning. And now he's like, I'm going to Vegas, I'm going to play in the World Series. It's like, if all you needed was the 30 grand, you should have just done that at the beginning instead of doing all this, you know?
Right, and we've talked about this on Twitter, I believe, too. Like, the entry to the World Series of Poker main event is $10,000.
$10,000.
You could have gone, you could have had a nice hotel, you could have bought a couple drinks, and then come back. Like,
the girlfriend would have been mad. You know?
Yeah, exactly. There's so many issues. I know, Chris, I know we're boring you to death, but like I think this is what a lot of people enjoy about this movie is nitpicking the actual poker part of it. And like I said, the acting is fantastic. I love the casting. I love everything like that. I think the pacing is really great in it. I like the scenes like with the state troopers and the jail scene. And there's just a lot of good in this movie. It's the little details like this where I wish they almost had like an outside consultant who could kind of be like, hey, that's not tight. That's not tight. We need to clean this up. There's all these little issues in it, and like I said, it's literally one of my favorite things about watching this movie is just picking up on more and more of them. Like I said, Sammy, you and I have had a back and forth about this movie multiple times, yes. And the list just keeps going on. I have more, but I'm going to spare you. But
I have 2 more that I kind of need to get out there. So can I do that?
Of course.
Sorry, Chris.
No, go for it.
So something that just always tilted me is in the last scene versus Teddy KGB. And first off, you mentioned this, Yancy, there's so many great rewatchable scenes. And one of the things I love about this movie is you can rewatch it. Like, hey, I'm going to sit down and watch this movie and be entertained. But I also put it on in the background a lot. Yep. When I'm like writing or something like that. And while it's not amazing for my writing process, you look up and all of a sudden it's, the poker montage or, where they get beat up at the cop club or the final scene. And you're like, dude, I'm going to chill out and watch this for a minute. And one of the things that I really take like issue with is Mikey finally sees KGB's tell with the Oreos, which is ridiculous in and of itself. But then he goes ahead and tells Teddy KGB, he's like, well, I'd normally like let him, keep, dumping off his chips to me, but I don't have that kind of time. It's like, what does that mean? You don't have that kind of time to like use his tell against him. Oh, I'm just going to tell him that I saw his tell and it's going to tilt him. If somebody spotted my tell and then they told me about it instead of using it, I'd laugh at them. I'd be like, you're an idiot. I'm going to take all your cash. Yep. So that was an issue. And then one of my other issues, I absolutely hate the final song when the credits come on. It's a song from the Counting Crows called Baby I'm a Big Star Now. And it just like, for me, I was never that into the Counting Crows, so maybe I'm biased, but I was just like, this song does not fit at all with the movie. Like,
it's cringeworthy. It is literally cringeworthy.
Whose choice was this?
Well, I'm going to jump in with something because when I mentioned on Twitter that we were going to do this movie, Walter McMichael at Real Fake Walter had this to say about the movie. He said it's a great start and finish. I do have one question I haven't been able to figure out, and I need an explanation. Why does he need to risk the 30 grand he saved up to make a run at the main event when it's a 10K buy-in? I never understood this.
Exactly.
The same thing, right? So same thing.
Exactly.
I'm going to tie together a couple of things that you guys have been saying because I've just been kind of picking things out. So I think based on everything you're saying with the flaws in it and stuff, it seems like this movie is a perfect example of a great cast with a bad script. Is that fair to say?
Yes and no. I really do like overall I think it holds up. The movie itself, like I really think it's rewatchable. It entertains me every time. I really enjoy the pacing of the movie, the scenes in the movie. But when you're like really into poker, there are some things that they didn't quite tie in together. Just a lot of the things we've talked about. The minutia, yeah.
Minutia, yeah.
There's definitely issues. That's for sure.
I think the way this movie plays out, and Sammy, you touched base on this, and I agree with you. It seems like the director is trying to make a statement that poker is a sport, and you've got the guy that loses and then makes his way back for a shot at the champ and then beats him, and it's like I said, it's like Rocky at a card table. But I'd rather watch Rocky. In fact, I'd rather watch Rocky 3 because Hulk Hogan's in that one, and so is Mr. T too. Pity the fool.
Was that made before 1985?
Yes, it was. Both of them were, of course, 1976 and 1981. So John Malkovich, you mentioned too. I like him in pretty much everything he's in, but that Russian accent was so phony. It wasn't even believable. It was so. I didn't like him in this movie. I didn't.
I think that makes it endearing. To be honest with you, I love that it's a bad Russian accent. I love it.
I don't know. And that big showdown with him at the end, to me, it wasn't suspenseful. It wasn't climactic. I thought you knew he was going to win. And you know what I would have liked to see? I'd like to see John Malkovich turn to him at the end and drop the phony accent and go, "I've just been with you."
They're going to do that in the remake.
Now 100%. That would have been a good ending,
Chris, you've missed your calling in life. You really should just rewrite old movies. That's something you should have done.
There you go. so I'll do that maybe. So I've got a question for you guys, because you guys both obviously love poker. It's a big thing for you. Do either one of you guys ever dream of going to the World Series of Poker in Vegas one day?
Yes. Sammy? Yes, absolutely. In fact, it was one of those things where when I was playing for work, it was one of those things where I always said, "Oh, I'll go next year. I'll go next year," and then I ended up not going, and online poker got DOJ'd up and FBI'd up in 2011, and after that, it was like I was kind of forced to not have it be a big part of my life. I had to go get a real job and, become an actual adult. And that was very, traumatic for me. But I always wanted to go, and then I never did. And I think for any serious poker player, you have to understand the World Series of Poker is 50 plus events. And it culminates with the main event, which is the 10K buy-in. But there's so many 1,500 and $3,000 events. They're obviously not all no limit hold'em. There's just a wide swath of card games. And it's really like Christmas. And so, for me, it's actually one of my big regrets as a poker player is I have not done it yet. And it's one of those things. It's one of my things that I want to do in the future is go there and play the main event. And more importantly, play a couple of the smaller ones as well, like the 1,500s and the $3,000s and, get in there as well.
Yancy, is this the reason why you're going out to California in a couple months?
To take Sammy's money? Absolutely.
Exactly. Yes. And then head over to Vegas and go to the World Series of Poker.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's going to be more people there. It's not just going to be me and Sammy hanging out together, as fun as that might sound to me and terrible as it might sound to Sammy. But I assume I'm going to be taking all of his friends' money. But, ultimately, like Sammy said, that's kind of the dream that everybody has, as unrealistic as it is to go play in the main event, or at least just make it out to Vegas. I know, Sammy, you've been to Vegas several times. I personally have never gone.
A billion times.
Yeah, a billion times. I've never gone. It's more of a journey for me living in South Florida, but that is something that's always in the back of every poker player's mind. Even if you're a novice, even if you're a recreational player who has a very limited grasp of the game, it's just magic. It's just one of those things where everybody wants to go once. It's like a pilgrimage to Mecca or something. Eventually I will. Obviously it's, the main event is pretty pricey, but it's something I'm definitely going to do before I die, even though my wife is super, super pissed off about it. But yeah.
Okay. Well, I have another question for you guys then, because to me, I know poker's been around forever and will be around forever. And that's not the point I'm trying to make. The thing for me though, is it felt like, and that's why this movie feels dated to me too, because it feels like poker became a real fad in the late 90s. And it was just this fatty thing that was on. I remember a time around the time this movie came out, 97, 98, 99, every channel you put on TV was people playing friggin' poker. And it was like, okay, give me a break. To me, it felt like a fad.
It was. And it was a little bit later, because I think it really kicked off. I think that 2003, I think it was, Moneymaker win. I think that was when poker really got big into the mainstream. So it was a couple years after that. But yeah, it was a fad, if you want to say, from 03 to 2011. And everybody was in it. It was like Bitcoin, you know what I mean? And yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to say it was a fad insofar as like it was a perfect culmination of all these different things. Like you said, Chris Moneymaker in 2003, where people saw a regular guy, like a regular, semi-redneck guy, just a normal dude buying in for $50 and winning a satellite and then winning the World Series of Poker. It was the introduction of, like the whole cam where people could actually see what poker players had, and it opened up. All of a sudden, it went from being, a solitary game that was incredibly boring for spectators to being a spectator sport of the best possible kind. And then with the advent of internet poker, anybody who was watching on TV could immediately go make a really small deposit and start playing immediately. So it was a fad, but it was also it was fueled more by accessibility. I think just because literally anybody with a computer and an internet connection and a little bit of money could play. And then, like Sammy said, once the Department of Justice completely shut down all those sites, for various reasons, it cut off that lifeblood that was poker, where you had all of these new people, we call them fish, in the industry, where they were just funneling in money. And then people like Sammy and myself were basically profiteering off of them. But yeah, in that sense, it was a fad. But the United States government had a huge part in killing it. Had that not happened, I think it still would have been a lot more relevant today than it was now, and we wouldn't be talking about it in the same ilk. We wouldn't say that poker was a fad. It would have been more of a mainstream sport or a hobby.
Yeah, I really think you're right about this, because not only did, every John Q. public want to play, but it also brought in like this new wave of like smart young analysts who weren't even gamblers by nature. And we're actually seeing that, all three of us are huge into baseball. We're seeing that in sports a lot now with baseball and football, where people who might not have even grown up, playing the sport at all are now analyzing the sport and breaking it down and have like new ideas of how to analyze it. And it's really, that game theory kind of thing where, it brought a lot of chess players. It brought a lot of backgammon players. And, those people with analytical minds and game theory minds, it was very popular for them too. And, I think there was a lot to that. And I think we see a lot of those people now when we see daily fantasy, right? A lot of people, there's some great DFS players who don't even watch the games, who are literally, they create models and analyze things. They don't even like the sport that much, but they know there's profit if they can out-analyze other people. So I think it's a really interesting dichotomy, the kind of people who gravitated toward poker at this time.
Okay, I tell you what, guys, let's have a little bit of fun.
Fun with Yancy.
Because I consider Texas Hold'em poker to be a fad from the 90s, I want you to just run with me on this. Okay?
Okay.
And you guys are millennials, so I'm going to have some fun from your childhood. Okay? I'm going to give you some trivia questions based on other fads of the 90s as well. Okay? You guys both.
This is quite the stretch, even for you, Chris.
Yep. So this should be a snap for you guys to get. You guys were kids in the 90s. You're growing up. So fads were like all the rage when you were a kid, right? So here's the thing. I'm going to give you some questions on 90s fads. See how well you do. Okay?
Okay.
In the 90s, guys, the acronym WWJD became popular. What does WWJD stand for?
What would Jesus do?
Yes. Congratulations. That's right. What would Jesus do?
Hallelujah.
Okay, so this 90s fad, gentlemen, started in Hawaii by kids flipping milk bottle caps. But soon it caught on with people as collecting the caps rather than playing with them. What's the 90s fad?
Pogs.
Yes.
Pogs.
Yes, very, very good. Okay, so every generation, every decade really, has a very popular hairstyle. The 70s had the Farrah. The 80s had the mullet and the Jerry curl. Oh, both wonderful. And the 90s had a hairstyle made popular by a sitcom. Gentlemen, what was the name of the hairstyle that swept the 90s?
I don't know. Is it the Ross Geller? I don't know.
No. Is it Saved by the Bell? I don't know.
The Rachel. The Rachel was the name of the hairstyle.
Oh, I was close. I had the right show.
You had her boyfriend. Congratulations.
Oh, man.
Okay, so this 1990s exercise fad, gentlemen, it basically was comprised of a bent metal tube that had a spring in it that was hawked on TV by Suzanne Summers. Can you name this 90s fad?
Come on, Sammy.
You placed it between okay, guys, I'll give you a hint. You placed it between your knees and you compressed the spring to get a quote-unquote workout.
Oh man, this is like
I remember
shake weight.
I remember seeing it. I just don't know what the name was. Is it like a Bowflex or like a Powerflex or something?
No, it was the Thigh Master. Thigh
the Thigh Master.
Okay, guys, the Spice Girls. They epitomized the concept of the word fad in the 90s, right? What was the real name of Baby Spice? Baby Spice, believe it or not, that wasn't her real name at birth. What was her real name?
What?
Who cares? I don't know.
Yeah, don't ruin this for me. I only know Baby Spice.
Okay, it was Emma Bunton. Okay. Okay, here's a 90s fad for you, the Macarena. You guys remember the Macarena, right?
Oh, yeah. My fiance and I have, like, outlawed this from our wedding playlist.
Okay,
she's like,
okay.
Are there any songs you don't want? And I'm like, the Macarena. Do not let the DJ play that.
All right, well, who's the band that played the Macarena?
No idea.
You guys are supposed to be like, millennials and 90s and all this stuff. It's Los Del Rios, okay? Last week on the podcast, Yancy, you mentioned something, and you mentioned Linkin Park. So I'm going to throw an easy one at you, because Linkin Park was very famous, as you mentioned last week, for fusing heavy metal with other music styles, right? So
Correct.
They came up with sort of a new music genre. It featured artists also like Korn and Limp Bizkit, right? What's that new music style called? What was the name given to that music style?
It's either rap rock or new metal.
New metal. Congratulations. I give you that.
Yes.
I would have accepted
knew-
aggro metal as well. So that's good.
I knew Yancey would get this. He had it in the bag. Anything music, he's on top of it.
Yancy,
But it's new. It's new spelled N-U, so it's like
N-U.
super edgy.
Exactly. That's you millennials, I tell you.
Ooh.
Okay, so Yancy, you mentioned Saved by the Bell, so I'm going to end you on a Saved by the Bell question, because nothing screams 90s fads more than the TV hit, and I use that term loosely, gentlemen, Saved by the Bell. So, gentlemen, Saved by the Bell ended its illustrious run on TV with a movie that featured the marriage of Zach and Kelly. Yancy, Sammy, can you name the title of the movie that marked the finale of Saved by the Bell?
I cannot.
I'm surprised. I thought you guys would know. It was Saved by the Bell Wedding in Las Vegas, which is where you guys are going to play the World Series of Poker. So, it would have been a nice tie in there. But
That was a really fitting end right there. It was the thing that came before Saved by the Bell, between that and Saved by the Bell, the college years.
No, it actually came after I liked Saved by the Bell, the college years, and it only lasted 1 year, and then it got canceled, and they made this movie after the college years.
Oh, really?
Yep, they ended with Saved by the Bell, Wedding in Las Vegas. They all went to Vegas, and like I say, Zach and Kelly got married. It was really dumb. And at the very, very end, I remember Lisa and like the principal all made an appearance. It was really bad. But anyway, so, there you go. So we got to throw at a movie you guys both obviously kind of liked. But obviously it's so funny for a movie you guys liked. You sure had a boatload of criticisms for it. You guys came
That's part of the fun.
Yeah, I
That's
guess.
part of the fun.
It's all good. It's all good. It is what it is. Sammy, you want to just remind everybody whereabouts they can find you and all your work?
Yeah, for sure. I write for RotoGrinders, rotogrinders.com, on Twitter at Sammy Reid, FI, and the Baseballholics Anonymous podcast, like you said at the top, myself and my good friend Doug Thorburn. We have a great time doing it. It's just all about baseball because we're huge baseball geeks. So always a good time with that.
Yancey and I are baseball geeks too. That's how we got to know you. And you'll find Yancey and I on Twitter at Yancey Eaton or at C McBrien. And you'll find all our information at popgoesyourworld.com. Yancey, it's time for me to throw a movie to you. Okay, so
I forgot this part.
Yep, I'm going to throw you a movie. It's a Gen X film, obviously. That's the way it works. You need to watch it and come back and talk about it next week. It's one of the two movies for me that is basically a master class for an acting ensemble. And it's also a good thing with this movie, a really interesting piece of trivia, is it's one of only 3 movies in history. We'll always talk about the Oscars here. It's one of only 3 movies in history that won all 4 of the major awards, being Best Picture, Best Director, Actor, and Actress. And, the first movie to do it was It Happened One Night in 1934. Silence of the Lambs did it in 1991, but this movie in 1975 did it as well. I would like you to watch One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. It's based on the Ken Kesey novel, the countercultural novel from the 60s. And if you have ever seen Jack Nicholson in anything, which I know you have, and if you know of him as you think of him as, being in like A Few Good Men or something like that, wait till you get a load of him in this movie. You are going to be blown.
I have to say, this might be a top 10 movie of all time. This is fantastic movie, Yancey. If you haven't seen it, like, you're in for a treat, in my opinion.
Well, Sammy, that's next week, and nobody asked you, frankly.
So I kind of blew my load talking about Rounders bet sizing here, didn't I?
Yeah, man. He just cut down all your chips right there, man, or whatever the saying is. I don't know. You guys are talking German to me with all that stuff, but Yancy went all in on that one and won. So let's just say that. So Yancy, you got to watch One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Come back next week and be prepared to talk all about it. All right? Are you up for the challenge?
All right. I am up for the challenge, and really quickly before we end it, what did you actually think of the movie? Like, give us a score. What'd you think?
Score. So if I got to rate it out of 10, probably give it a 6.
Yeah. Okay, decent.
Yep, I thought it was rather boring at times. I thought it was a little trite at times. I thought the script wasn't great. I didn't like John Malkovich. I don't know. I found it to be a little predictable in places too. So I'm just being honest.
Okay. Fair enough.
It's all. I just hate. Sorry to hate on you.
Life goes on, Chris. Yeah. It's okay.
Oh, well, and maybe you'll hate on my movie next week. I guess we'll wait and see. Although Sammy's setting it up, top 10 movie of all time, so we'll have to see.
Yeah, you can't shade it, Yancy. I will say, as a film critic, I would probably give this movie like a 6, 6.5. As myself, it's like an 8.5, 9. It's fantastic.
Yeah, there you go. Okay, so well, until then, this is Chris McBrien for Yancy Eaton, saying thanks for listening to Pop Goes Your World, the pop culture podcast for the generations.
Thank you for listening to the Pop Goes Your World podcast. Continue the conversation on Twitter at @CMcBrien or @Yancy Eaton. Please consider leaving a review for the podcast on iTunes or wherever you download and listen to the show.